So, Matt Kittle is Bureau Chief of Wisconsin Watchdog, a Madison-based news organization that investigates waste, fraud, and abuse in government, or as Kittle likes to call it, job security. He is a 25-year veteran of radio, print, TV, and online journalism, and winner of multiple Associated Press journalism awards. His series on Wisconsin's political John Doe investigation, Wisconsin's Secret War, has been cited in national and regional publications and in court cases related to the probe. I give you Matt Kittle.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Chris, for hosting this event. Anytime that I can come out and talk to good people, good citizens across the state of Wisconsin about what I believe to be the most important issue facing us all today, I jump at the chance. I started looking into what was reported to me as a series of abuses on citizens' rights. September of 2013, in 2 years, but I can tell you this, for some people, this thing has been going on for 5.5 years. Let me put that into perspective for you. When the John Doe investigation began in 2010, a child who was born at that time started kindergarten this year. That's how long these people have been under this specter, this cloud, this illegal, and now we know, unconstitutional investigation. I told some folks this morning in West Dallas that if you're familiar with the John Doe probe and the John Doe law, this archaic law that has been on the books here in the state of Wisconsin before Wisconsin was a state, this goes back to the territorial times, basically. John Doe procedure is this wide open tool that prosecutors use. And now we know just how they used it. We're getting a clearer picture of how they used it to abuse citizens in this state. But it's similar to a grand jury investigation with this exception. A grand jury, you have the benefit of a jury of your peers to sit in judgment over you. In a John Doe investigation, one judge has the authority, extraordinary authority, to compel people to testify. And they can do it in complete secret. So that if you, as a target or a witness of these investigations, say anything to anybody about what has happened to you, you can go to jail on contempt of court charges. You can be subject to thousands of dollars in fines. But I was telling some folks in West Dallas today, the Supreme Court ruling was a welcome addition in July. After 2 separate courts said, you are conducting an investigation without probable cause of any wrongdoing. After 2 other courts said, there is compelling evidence to suggest that you committed, at the very least, an overreach in power, an overreach of your authority. But the court case has, all kinds of legal precedent, and it has all kinds of court documents, and it's all about the legalese. This is really heavy stuff. I mean, this is First Amendment stuff, and it's Fourth Amendment stuff, and 14th Amendment stuff, and it's Supreme Courts, and it's appeals courts, and it's all of these legal things. But I'm going to tell you this. The John Doe investigation, at its heart, is about people. Human beings who had their lives ripped apart and torn upside down by partisan investigators, by partisan prosecutors, and now we're learning more and more by a so much less than nonpartisan government accountability board.
Yeah.
Let me put it in perspective for you. Maybe you've heard the stories. If you haven't, I think they are as relevant today as when they were first reported by conservative news organizations, because you certainly can't count on the mainstream press in this state to tell you the full story of the sort of abuses that have gone on. We'll get to that a little bit later, but since we heard about the story of a 16-year-old boy, imagine this. 16-year-old boy has just taken his parents very early in the morning to the Dane County Airport. They're on their way to work for their charity overseas. It's an orphanage charity. They work with orphans. The boy gets back. The sun has not risen. And as he gets settled into his home, before school begins, before the day begins, there's a pounding on the door. He opens the door to see lights flashing, police officers with their guns clearly showing, and them screaming at the 16-year-old kid, "We've got a warrant, you open up this door, we're going to search your house." He tells them, "Can I call my parents?" "No, you can't call your parents." "Can I call my grandparents? They live a half a mile down the road." "No, you can't call your parents." "Well, can I call an attorney?" "No, you can't call an attorney." That's one of the more egregious examples. You have a lot more of them. You may have heard the story of Deb Jordahl. Deb had her home raided like so many others on the morning of October 3rd, 2013. We're coming up on the 2-year dubious anniversary of that. When they rooted through her possessions as they did that, they forced her and her family to sit on a couch in their family room. Her daughter, her 15-year-old daughter, asked to get up to use the bathroom in her own home. They said, "Sit down, you're not going anywhere." She asked if she could contact an attorney. They closed the door on that, as they did for so many of these people. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine having your stuff rooted through? Law enforcement officials, a dozen cops at your door, this very loud, this very showy event going on in your home. They're taking your possessions. You can't even contact an attorney. Now, I've become pretty good friends with a gentleman that I respect a great deal. His name is Hans von Strakowski, who works at the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. Hans is one of the premier experts, I think, on First Amendment law, civil rights laws. Hans, his mother grew up in Nazi Germany. His father grew up in the old Soviet Union. They escaped Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union because of abuses by those governments that Hans said mirror these here in Wisconsin. It's quite an indictment on what the National Review has called our national shame. Others have called our national embarrassment. And that's really, when I talk to people about this, we can get into the court cases, and they're very important. We can get into the challenges before the state Supreme Court, extremely important. And what was delivered in July, extremely important, because the Supreme Court said, enough, no more. You have abused the rights of these people whose only crime was that they shared a political belief, an idea that the government is not the end-all, be-all to our answers. People who believe in limited government, and they have the right to say what they want to say. They have a right to spend money, pool their resources together to say what they want to say politically. But Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm and his minions, David Robles, Bruce Landgraf, David Buddy, these folks didn't think that conservatives had a right. There's a term that I missed in the session this morning in West Dallas. It's a legal term, and it's one of these legalese terms. And again, I keep this thing as much as I can focused on the human beings who are so abusing this, but I think it speaks to the heart of this. There's something in law called disparate treatment. And it's at the core of some lawsuits against these entities. Disparate treatment in this case means that John Chisholm, the Milwaukee County District Attorney's Office, the GAB, all of these folks who conducted these investigations went after conservative groups and only conservative groups, some 29 conservative organizations, but did nothing when it came to the left. Why is that? It's because they protected their friends. And the assertion, and we're seeing plenty of evidence to back it up, is that they protected their friends and they went after their enemies. That's what's so ultimately scary about the John Doe investigation, about the nonpartisan agency that's supposed to be conducting a parallel, that's what they call it, a parallel investigation. An agency that we have found out in recent weeks communicated in some very partisan expressions with a guy by the name of Shane Falk, legal counsel for the Government Accountability Board, who in 2008, before he was hired by the Government Accountability Board, talked to that same nonpartisan board about ways of getting around the Constitution. Folks, we can find ways to get around the Constitution so that we can close off political speech, First Amendment rights of these people, in direct violation of what we know, have been multiple decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court and by courts across the country. But what we continue to have here is more and more examples of a partisan agency. We found out that Shane Falk, who is no longer with the Government Accountability Board, but was very much involved, directly involved in these John Doe investigations, sent an email scolding Special Prosecutor, John Doe Special Prosecutor Francis Schnitz, for having the audacity in 2014 to say, wait a minute folks, Scott Walker was never a target of an illegal scheme. You remember the headlines? A legal scheme is sought across the country. They painted it thick. The media was made to walk that back because Francis Schnitz, the special prosecutor, said, no, we didn't say he was a target. We have an email, and you can link to it on our site at Wisconsin Watchdog. And it's from Shane Falk, and he is yelling at Francis Schnitz saying, I can't believe you just did that. Why, basically, you're going to put Mary Burke's campaign in peril, the Democrat candidate for governor. You can't do that. You're going to make her out to be a liar. She just started running this campaign ad that says Walker is at the center of a national criminal scheme. There's your nonpartisan government accountability. Many, many more examples that will come to light in the coming months, I believe, of just how partisan this organization was. That speaks to some of the other elements that are involved in the John Doe investigation right now, or the impact, the ripple effects from the John Doe. The legislature is now in a position, leadership is in a position to reform the archaic John Doe law to make sure that it cannot be used for political investigations. But as State Representative Dave Craig told us this morning, the John Doe Reform Bill isn't just about the abuses of this political John Doe investigation. You know that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 John Doe investigations every year. Now, some of them involve heinous, serious crimes, sexual assaults, homicides, drug deals, these sorts of things. Many others involve thefts of lawn equipment. Small, petty things where a neighbor has told law enforcement, hey, you might want to check out John there. I think he's stolen a lawnmower in the neighborhood here. I'm not kidding. That small of an event can trigger a secret John Doe investigation where they're compelling witnesses to come in, same sort of thing. bound by the same sort of laws on secrecy. You can't tell anybody. This is happening every day. It's not recorded. People don't know about it. But that's what the John Doe law is. Now, of course, it was taken to the absolute extreme, as we found out, in targeting dozens of conservative groups, and of course John Doe 1, which is John Doe 2, and they're all the same because they rolled all of that information from the first John Doe, which targeted Scott Walker and his political allies and associates, and former aides in the Milwaukee County Executive's office. That's all part and parcel, and we know how extreme that became. But every day, there is a John Doe investigation going on. Citizens in this state who may be, just like the rest of these folks caught up in this abuse of John Doe, did nothing wrong. They just happened to be part of an investigation. Dean Strang's an attorney from Madison, and he's an excellent criminal defense attorney, and an ardent supporter of John Doe reform. And he talks about John Doe investigations, people subject of John Doe investigations, who 20 years later still don't know if they can talk about that John Doe investigation without the penalties that go along with it. Now, something's wrong. There's a real disconnect there. So in October, there is going to be a move, there is going to be a push. Dave Craig's bill, Senator Tom Tiffany, they've introduced legislation that will reform John Doe. I don't think it goes far enough. I'm here to tell you. I think it's a very good start. And hopefully we get some strong lawmakers going to stand behind this. We know the left's not going to stand behind it. They have, unfortunately, that's the way it is. I don't understand it. This is not a conservative versus a Republican issue. If it can happen to these conservatives and these conservative groups, it can happen. It certainly hasn't happened in this disparate treatment in John Doe land now, but it certainly at some time can happen. A conservative group or a liberal group can find itself in the same sort of position. So you've got that. You've got GAB reform that's being introduced by State Representative Dean Knudsen. It's going to dismantle, this bill is going to dismantle the Government Accountability Board as we know it.
Yes.
Major steps in not just reform, but making sure that you have a system that's set up where citizens are involved, where you have true accountability going on. More than that, what's most important about the bill, I think, is it decentralizes the power base of the Government Accountability Board, where you have one bureaucrat who has been there for 30 plus years with all of the power, who can determine everything. And you have judges, arguably, who have been absentee landlords, perhaps, at the very least. Worst case scenario is they have been complicit in the activities of the partisan staff members. And we'll find out more on that coming up. So you've got that legislation as well. And you have something that we just learned today, I think is extremely important. Dave Craig soon will be introducing legislation that will, a rarity, it's not happened in a long time, it will give subpoena power to the legislature to be able to compel the Government Accountability Board, the way they compel all of these innocent people in this John Doe investigation, compelled to go up to a committee and testify under oath and say, what did you know? What did you do in this John Doe investigation? Turn over your documents, tell us what you did. Because right now, state law says they don't have to tell you anything. Those are incredibly important changes that are coming up on the legislative front. And at the end of the day, let me wrap this up. At the end of the day, this is about people. We're about to hear from a person who I have said on numerous occasions, and it is a definitive statement. A gentleman who, had he not stood up and said, enough is enough, you wouldn't know about this. Eric O'Keefe has taken on the establishment of Wisconsin, not just the GAB and the Milwaukee County prosecutors, but their partners, their PR partners, I believe, at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Wisconsin State Journal, and the mainstream media in this state, who, for reasons that may be clear to you, but I just, as a journalist, can't understand why they refuse to cover the story of people who were abused, who had their constitutional rights dragged from them. Eric O'Keefe has been there, and I can tell you there are a number of targets of this investigation who have spoken to me. They have put their liberty at peril in doing so. Now, a number of them early on spoke to me anonymously. You can imagine why. But they gave me details of just how abusive this thing was. And Eric's going to speak to you about what it is like to be a target of this endless, meandering fishing expedition known as the John Doe investigation. Thanks. Should we take questions now, or should